You ever watch hope die? It doesn't happen all at once, like a gunshot. It bleeds out slow, drop by agonizing drop, until a person is just a hollow shell that breathes and waits for a phone call that never comes. I saw that look in Mary Ann Harrison's eyes 45 years ago, and I still see it when I close my own at night. They found her daughter not where we looked, but where even the devil wouldn't dare to tread. In 1970, California wasn't just the land of milk and honey. It was a place where dreams went to die just as fast as they were born. And hitchhiking wasn't a mode of travel. It was Russian roulette with a fully loaded chamber. 16-year-old Julia Harrison walked out of her house on a crisp Tuesday to buy a Doors record and simply evaporated. No scream, no witnesses, no skid marks. Just a red scarf found a week later on the shoulder of Highway 17, the only crumb in a case that froze a town's blood for half a century. But the real horror wasn't that she vanished. The real horror started 3 months later when the package arrived at the precinct. I was a cub reporter for the Santa Cruz Sentinel back then, green as spring grass and hungry for a byline. I thought the world was black and white. Bad guys wore black hats, and the good guys always won before the credits rolled. God, I was an idiot. This case taught me that evil doesn't wear a hat. It wears a neighbor's face, drives a beat-up Ford, and smiles at you while buying garden hoses at the hardware store. Now, 55 years later, the phone finally rang. They say they caught him. But the truth? The truth is messier than any lie I ever told myself to sleep at night. My name is Jack Miller, and if you're reading this, it means the embargo is finally lifted. I'm 78 years old now. My joints ache when it rains, and I've got a liver that's filed more complaints than a union rep. But back in 1970, I was 23, invincible, and driving a rusted-out Mustang that smelled of stale cigarettes and ambition. Santa Cruz was different then. It was a weird mix of old money, surf bums, and a creeping darkness that leaked down from the mountains. The summer of love was dead and buried, replaced by the paranoid hangover of the Manson murders just a year prior. People were locking their doors again? Julia Harrison was the kind of girl who made you believe the world was soft. She was 16, played the flute in the school band, and had a smile that could disarm a traffic cop. Her father, Dale, was a mechanic at the local Chevron, a man with grease permanently etched into his fingerprints, and his spine made of iron. Her mother, Mary Ann, taught 3rd grade and baked pies for the church fundraisers. They were the American dream, picket fence and all, right until the moment the nightmare kicked in their front door. It was October 14th, 1970, a Tuesday. I remember the date because I was covering a dull city council meeting about zoning laws when the scanner in the newsroom crackled. 10 to 65, missing juvenile, 400 block of Walnut Avenue. It didn't sound like much. Kids ran away all the time, usually to chase a band or a boy, only to come dragging back home when the money ran out. I ignored it. We all did. But by Thursday, the tone had changed. The runaway narrative wasn't sticking. Julia had left her purse, her money, and her diary on her bed. Who runs away without their diary? Dale Harrison was practically living at the police station, demanding answers that Chief O'Malley didn't have. I went to their house on Friday. The air inside felt heavy, like the oxygen had been sucked out. Mary Ann sat on the floral sofa, staring at a spot on the wall, her hands twisting a handkerchief until the fabric tore. She didn't run, Mr. Miller, Dale told me, his voice tight, like a wire about to snap. She was making a cake for her brother's birthday. The batter is still in the bowl. That detail stuck with me. The batter in the bowl. It was so mundane, so interrupting. You don't walk away from a half-made cake. You get taken. I wrote my first piece on Sunday. Where is Julia? The headline was simple, maybe too simple, but it woke the town up. Search parties formed. Men in flannel shirts and hunting boots combed the woods of the Santa Cruz Mountains, poking sticks into the underbrush, dreading what they might find. I walked with them, notepad in hand, listening to the wind howl through the redwoods. Those trees ... they've seen things, I tell you. Ancient, silent witnesses. If redwoods could talk, half the population of California would be on death row. Weeks turned into a month. The leads dried up. The psychics started calling in useless vultures, preying on desperation. One said she was in a body of water. Another said she was in a red house. They're always vague enough to be right, specific enough to give false hope. Mary Ann listened to every single one of them. She was drowning, and she'd grab a razor blade if she thought it would keep her afloat. Then came the package. It was January 1971. A small brown cardboard box, wrapped in twine, no return address. It was addressed simply to the Chief of Police. Inside, wrapped in layers of newspaper, was a single lock of blonde hair tied with a blue ribbon. And a note. Letters cut from magazines, cliché as hell, but effective. She is cold, but she is not alone. The lab confirmed the hair was Julia's. It had been cut post-mortem. The town didn't just panic. It unraveled. Parents pulled their kids out of school. Gun sales skyrocketed. I remember sitting in O'Malley's office, watching him smoke 3 cigarettes in 10 minutes. "We're chasing a ghost, Jack," he told me. "Whoever this is, he's playing with us. We dubbed him the Ribbon Man in the press. I regret that now. Giving them a nickname gives them power. It turns a pathetic sadist into a legend. But newspapers need to sell, and fear sells better than sex." The investigation hit a wall that lasted 50 years. Suspects came and went. Drifters, ex-boyfriends, the weird guy who lived in a van down by the river. They grilled a local teacher for 3 days until he tried to hang himself in his cell. Turned out he was innocent, just nervous. We ruined lives trying to find the one who ruined ours. I stayed close to the Harrisons. Over the years, I watched Gail turn into stone and Mary Ann turn into dust. They divorced in 75. Grief is a heavy burden for 2 people to carry together. Dale died of a heart attack in 88. He never stopped looking. Every weekend, he'd drive up Highway 9, scanning the ravines. Mary Ann moved to a nursing home in Scottsdale 10 years ago. Dementia took her memory, which, in a cruel way, was a mercy. She forgot Julia was missing. She thought she was just at school. I retired in 2012. I packed up my desk, took my plaque, and tried to drink enough scotch to forget the faces of the ones we never found. But Julia was always there. She was the open loop, the unfinished sentence. Then, last week, Detective Ramirez called me. Ramirez is young, sharp, uses computers like I used a typewriter. He runs the cold case unit, which is basically a closet full of dusty boxes and broken dreams. "Jack," he said, "you sitting down?" "At my age, I'm always sitting down, kid." "What is it?" "We got a hit. Genetic genealogy. We ran the DNA from the saliva on the stamp." "The stamp?" I asked, confused. "What stamp?" "The package from 71, the Ribbon Man package. We never had the tech to pull it off the adhesive before without destroying it. But the new vacuum method. Jack, we found a third cousin. We built a tree." My heart did that funny flutter thing that my doctor warns me about. And we have a name. He's alive, Jack. He's 79 years old, living in a retirement community in Florida. We arrested him this morning. "Who is he?" I whispered, my hand gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "You know him, Jack," Ramirez said, and his voice dropped an octave. "You interviewed him twice." The room spun. I tried to scroll through the mental Rolodex of thousands of faces I'd seen over 50 years. Who? Arthur Penson. The phone almost slipped from my hand. Arthur Penson. The mild-mannered librarian? The guy who organized the search parties? The guy who brought Mary Ann casseroles every Sunday for a year? That's impossible, I stammered. Arthur ... He's a pillar of the community. He read books to orphans. He also strangled Julia Harrison and kept a lock of her hair as a trophy. Ramirez said, cold as ice. And Jack? He didn't just kill her. We found photos in his Florida condo. There were others. Julia wasn't the first. And she definitely wasn't the last. I hung up and stared at the wall. Arthur Penson. I remembered his hands soft, manicured, smelling of old paper and peppermint. I remembered shaking those hands. I remembered him crying at the memorial service. I needed a drink. But more than that, I needed to know why. And I needed to see him. I flew to Florida the next day. My knees hated the flight, but my rage kept me upright. I managed to get access press credentials still open some doors, even for old dinosaurs like me. The interrogation room was cold. Arthur sat there, handcuffed to the table. He looked frail. His hair was gone, his skin liver-spotted. He looked like any grandpa you'd see feeding ducks at the park. Until he looked up, his eyes hadn't aged. They were the same pale, watery blue, and there was nothing behind them. No fear, no remorse, just a vast, empty boredom. "Hello, Jack," he rasped. His voice sounded like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "I wondered when you'd come. Did you bring your notebook?" "Cut the crap, Arthur," I said, sitting opposite him. "Why?" "That's all I want to know." She was a kid. She was buying a record. He smiled. It was a small, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. She was perfect, so full of life. I just wanted to see where the life went when it left. It's a curiosity, Jack, like seeing what's inside a clock. I wanted to reach across the table and squeeze the remaining life out of his throat. But I'm a reporter, I witness. I record. You sent the hair, I said. Why taunt the parents? It wasn't a taunt, he said, sounding genuinely offended. It was a gift, a piece of her to keep. I thought they'd appreciate it. The sickness rose in my gullet. This man was an alien, a creature wearing a human suit. Ramirez said there were others, I said. Arthur leaned back, the chains rattling. Oh, yes. The 70s were a busy time. So easy back then. No cameras. No DNA. People trusted each other. People trusted me. Tell me about the night, I said. Tell me exactly what happened. He sighed, like he was boring of the conversation. It was opportunistic, really. I saw her walking. I pulled over. Asked if she wanted a ride to the music store. She knew me. Mr. Penson from the library. She hopped right in. Smiled at me. Said it was a nice day. He paused, looking at his hands. I drove past the turnoff. She noticed about a mile later. Asked where I was going. I told her I knew a shortcut. She believed me. They always believe the nice librarian. And then? And then we went to the woods. The spot near the creek. It was quiet. Peaceful. Where is she, Arthur? I asked. Where is the rest of her? He looked me dead in the eye. She's everywhere, Jack. I spread her. A little bit here. A little bit there. She became part of the landscape. Isn't that poetic? I stood up. I couldn't breathe the same air as him anymore. You're going to die in a cage, Arthur? I spat. We all die in cages, Jack, he murmured. Mine just has bars. Yours has memories. I walked out into the blinding Florida sun. I felt dirty. I felt old. But as I stood there, watching the palm trees sway, I realized something. The story wasn't over. Arthur Penson had been active for decades. He moved around. He traveled. I pulled out my phone and called Ramirez. Don't close the file yet, I said. Why? He confessed, Jack. It's done. No, I said, watching a family of tourists walk by, laughing, oblivious to the monsters in their midst. He mentioned a shortcut. He used that word specifically. And he mentioned a creek. So, I remember a case from 1974. Oregon. A girl found near a creek. No leads. But the killer left something. A ribbon. There was silence on the other end. "I'm coming back, Ramirez," I said. "Get the files from Portland. Get the files from Seattle. Get them all. We're just getting started. I'm Jack Miller. I'm 78 years old. And I'm not done yet. Because the dead don't sleep, and neither do I." The flight back from Florida felt longer than my first marriage. I sat in seat 14C, nursing a club soda that had lost its fizz somewhere over Texas, staring at the back of the headrest in front of me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Arthur Penson's watery blue stare. I saw the way his manicured hands that had stamped due dates on Charlotte's Web and To Kill a Mockingbird for generations of children had rested calmly on the metal interrogation table. Hands that had strangled the life out of Julia Harrison and God knows how many others. When I landed in San Jose, the fog was rolling in over the hills, thick and gray, like a dirty blanket trying to smother the valley. It was fitting weather. I drove my beat-up Buick straight to the Santa Cruz station, bypassing my empty house. Sleep wasn't an option. Not when the ghosts were this loud. Ramirez was waiting for me. The kid looked like he hadn't slept in a week either. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up, and the whiteboard behind him, which used to just have Julia's name on it, was now covered in red marker. It looked less like a police investigation and more like a conspiracy theorist's basement wall. "You look like hell, Jack," Ramirez said by way of greeting, handing me a cup of coffee that smelled like burnt rubber and salvation. "You should see the other guy," I grunted, taking a sip. "He's eating Jell-O in a Florida holding cell and smiling about it. Did the box arrive?" Ramirez nodded toward a large plastic bin on his desk, sealed with evidence tape. Florida PD overnighted it. They raided his condo. "Jack, you need to prepare yourself." "It's meticulous." I walked over to the bin. "Open it." Inside, it wasn't the chaotic horde of a madman. It was organized, terrifyingly so. There were no body parts. Thank God, but there were items, souvenirs, and they were cataloged. Arthur Penson, the career librarian, had treated his murders like books in a collection. I reached in, wearing latex gloves, and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. It was an old appointment diary from 1974. I flipped it open. The handwriting was elegant, cursive, precise. April 12, 1974. Oregon coast. Cloudy with a chance of rain. Met S. 19 years old. Likes poetry. Discarded near the dunes. My stomach did a slow, sick roll. "Oregon," I whispered. "I was right. It gets worse," Ramirez said, picking up a stack of Polaroid photos sealed in plastic bags. He took pictures of the locations. Not the bodies, mostly. Just the spots. Empty clearings, lonely stretches of highway. A picnic bench in a deserted park. It's like he was building a travel guide to hell. I looked at the notebook again. "Who is S?" Ramirez tapped a file on his desk. "We're cross-referencing with the National Crime Information Center. We think it's Sarah Miller. No relation to you. She was a college student from Portland. Went hitchhiking to Canning Beach for spring break. Never came home. Her parents died thinking she ran off to join a commune. He called it discarded," I muttered, feeling the rage boil up again, hot and sharp. Like she was a piece of trash. "We have entries going back to 1965, Jack," Ramirez said quietly, "and they stop in 1998. That's 33 years. If this notebook is accurate, we're looking at maybe 40 victims. California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Arizona." I sat down heavily in the nearest chair. 40, an entire classroom of people. An entire busload of lives, snuffed out by the man who shushed people for talking too loud in the reading room. How did we miss him? I asked, more to myself than Ramirez. How did I miss him? I interviewed him in '71 after Julia disappeared. He was organizing the volunteer search. He made coffee for the cops, because he didn't fit the profile back then, Ramirez said, pacing the small room. We were looking for a drifter, a violent offender, a weirdo. Penson was ... beige. He was background noise. He was the guy you trust to watch your dog. I flipped through the notebook again, my eyes scanning the dates. August 1969, Santa Cruz, J.H. Julia Harrison. The entry was brief, too loud, but quiet in the end. Then I saw it. An entry from 1978. June 20th, 1978. Interstate 5 near Redding. The runner almost got away. Kept the shoe. I froze. The runner. What is it? Ramirez asked, seeing my face pale. I remember a case, I said, my mind racing back through decades of headlines. 1978. A girl was found wandering on the side of I-5, dehydrated, in shock. She said she'd escaped a man who tried to grab her at a rest stop. She said he drove a station wagon. Beige station wagon. Did they catch him? No, I said. The cops didn't believe her. She was a known runaway, had a history of drug use. They said she hallucinated it. They closed the file. What was her name? Ramirez was already at his computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. Brenda ... Brenda something. Brenda Lopez. Ramirez typed. A moment later, his face went slack. Brenda Lopez. Deceased 2005. Overdose. But Jack, look at the police report from '78. He turned the monitor toward me. I squinted at the grainy scan of the old typewritten report. Victim claims suspect had a distinctive smell. Peppermint and old paper. Peppermint, I whispered. Penson always sucked on those cheap peppermint candies. The ones with the red stripes. She escaped, Ramirez said, his voice rising with excitement. She escaped and nobody listened. But if she escaped, maybe she saw something. Maybe she described him. The description says average build, glasses, receding hairline. I read. That describes half the men in California in 1978. Wait, Ramirez said, zooming in on the bottom of the report. List of personal effects found on victim. 1 sneaker. White Converse. Left foot. I looked back at Penson's diary. Kept the shoe. He has the other sneaker, I said. It's in the box. We dove back into the plastic bin. We dug past the maps, past the ribbons, past the locks of hair sealed in envelopes. And there, at the very bottom, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag from a store that went out of business 20 years ago, was a dirty, yellowed white Converse sneaker. Right foot. Gotcha, Ramirez breathed. But the victory felt hollow. Brenda was dead. Julia was dead. Sarah was dead. The evidence was here, but the justice was decades late. It felt like we were archaeologists digging up a massacre, not detectives saving the day. There's something else, I said, picking up the notebook again. I had noticed a pattern. Look at the dates. Most of them are weekends. Or summer months. June, July, August. He was a school librarian, Ramirez noted. He had summers off. Exactly. But look at this gap here. 1982 to 1984. 2 years. No entries. No discards. Why? Maybe he was in prison? Hospital? Or maybe he moved, I said. Check his employment records. Where was Arthur Penson in the early '80s? Ramirez made a phone call. He spoke in rapid-fire police codes, waited, then listened. His expression darkened. He wasn't in California, Ramirez said, hanging up. He took a sabbatical. He went to Europe. Jack, he was in London and Paris for 2 years. My blood ran cold. International, I muttered. Does the notebook have European entries? I flipped the pages frantically. Nothing. The notebook jumped from '81 in Nevada to '85 in Sacramento. The pages between were torn out. He removed them, I said. Why remove those specifically? Maybe he got sloppy, Ramirez suggested. Maybe he left something behind that could trace back to him even now. Or maybe, I said, a terrible thought forming in my mind. Maybe he didn't work alone over there. I stood up, my joints popping. I needed fresh air. I needed to not be in a room with the trophies of a monster. I walked out the back door of the station, into the alleyway where the cops smoked. The night air was cool, smelling of ocean salt and exhaust. I lit a cigarette, a habit I'd quit 10 years ago, but kept an emergency pack for moments exactly like this. I watched the smoke curl up toward the streetlight. Penson was playing a game. Even now, locked up in Florida, he was playing. He knew we'd find the notebook. He knew we'd find the shoe. He wanted us to know how smart he was. But he tore out the pages from Europe. That meant he was protecting something. Or someone. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an unknown number. Miller, I answered. Is this Jack Miller, the reporter? A woman's voice. Shaky. Older. Retired, I said. Who is this? My name is Ellen. I saw the news about the arrest in Florida. About the cold case in Massachusetts and the link to California. Yes? I live in London now, she said. But in 1983, I was a student in Paris. I knew an American man there. An older man. He worked at the American Library in Paris. He was odd. I gripped the phone. What was his name, Ellen? He went by Artie, she said. Artie Penson. I didn't think anything of it until I saw his picture on the CNN website today. Mr. Miller. He didn't live alone in Paris. He had a roommate, a younger man. They went on hunting trips together on weekends. The cigarette burned my fingers, but I didn't drop it. A partner, I whispered. I think so, she said. And Mr. Miller? The roommate? I remember his name because it was unusual. He was American, too. He called himself the gardener. I hung up the phone and stared at the brick wall of the police station. The notebook wasn't just a ledger of death. It was a receipt for a partnership. Penson had torn out the pages not to protect himself, but to protect the gardener. I burst back into the squad room. Ramirez jumped. We need to contact Interpol, I shouted. And we need to find out who the hell the gardener is. Ramirez looked at me like I'd finally snapped. Jack, slow down. What happened? Penson isn't just a serial killer, I said, slamming my hand on the desk. He's a mentor. He had an apprentice in Europe. And if Penson is 79, his apprentice would be in his 50s now. In his prime. I looked at the whiteboard. The red lines connecting Penson's victims seemed to vibrate. We thought we were closing a book, but we had just opened a library. And somewhere out there, someone else was still checking books out. Get the flight logs, I ordered, forgetting I wasn't a cop, just an old man with a press pass. Find out who flew back with him in 1984. Ramirez didn't argue. He just started typing. The hunt wasn't over. It had just crossed an ocean. The flight to London was a special kind of torture for a man my age, but the adrenaline kept my heart pumping a rhythm that felt dangerously close to panic. Ramirez couldn't come jurisdiction issues and budget cuts. So, I was on my own, armed with a notebook, a freshly renewed passport, and a contact name at Scotland Yard that Ramirez had begrudgingly provided. Detective Inspector Sarah Thorne met me at a pub near Westminster. She wasn't what I expected. I pictured a stiff upper lip type with a bowler hat. Instead, I got a woman in her 40s with piercings in one ear and eyes that looked like they'd seen the bottom of too many pints in too many crime scenes. You the Yank looking for the librarian's mate? She asked, sliding a Guinness across the sticky table toward me. Jack Miller, I said, shaking her hand. And yes, we think Arthur Penson didn't work alone during his sabbatical in the 80s. A witness places him in Paris with a younger man. The gardener. Thorne took a long sip of her beer, foam clinging to her upper lip. Funny you should say that. The gardener. We had a series of disappearances in 83 and 84. Students mostly. Backpackers. Never found the bodies, but we found their gear. Passports, rucksacks, all neatly arranged in public parks. Like little shrines. Shrines? Aye, flowers planted around them. Tulips, roses. Someone took the time to dig, plant, and water. Hence the nickname in the tabloids. The Kensington Gardener. My blood ran cold. Penson's desk guards were careless, arrogant. But this, planting flowers, this was reverence. This was different. Did you ever catch him? I asked. Not a sniff, Thorne said. He stopped in late 84. Vanished. We assumed he died or moved on. But if your man Penson was here, ... She pulled a file from her bag. We ran the flight manifests you sent. Arthur Penson flew into Heathrow in June 82. Flew out of Charles de Gaulle in August 84. He traveled with a companion on 3 occasions. She slid a photocopy of an old passenger manifest across the table. Arthur Penson, 42, U.S. Thomas W. Graves, 24, U.S. Thomas Graves. I read. Who is he? That's the million-pound question, Thorne said. According to U.S. records, Thomas Graves died in a car accident in Ohio in 1980, 2 years before he supposedly flew to London with Penson. He's using a dead man's identity, I realized. Classic. Penson probably helped him set it up. A librarian knows how to find records of deceased people. Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. We dug into the Thomas Graves, who traveled with Penson. He applied for a French work visa, listed his occupation as landscape architect, the gardener. Do we have a photo? Thorne shook her head. Passports weren't digital back then. The physical records are likely dust in a French basement. But we have a description from a landlady in Notting Hill. She rented a flat to Penson and Graves in 83. Said Graves was quiet, handsome, obsessed with soil pH levels, and he had a tattoo. A vine of ivy wrapping around his left wrist. I wrote it down. Ivy tattoo. Left wrist. So where is he now? I asked. If Penson went back to the States in 84, did Graves go with him? No, Thorne said darkly. Penson flew back alone. We have no record of Thomas Graves leaving Europe. It's like he evaporated. I sat back, the noise of the pub fading into a dull roar. He didn't evaporate. He shed the skin. He became someone else. Or, Thorne suggested, leaning in, he stayed. Maybe he's still here, tending his gardens. The thought made me nauseous. Can we check the gardener crime scenes again? Maybe there's DNA we missed. Penson's DNA cracked the cold case in California. Maybe Graves left something too. Thorne sighed. Jack, those evidence lockers were flooded in the great pipe burst of 98. Most of the biologicals are ruined. But ... She hesitated. There was one item that survived, because it wasn't biological. It was a trowel. Found near a shrine in Hyde Park. We dusted it for prints back then, nothing. But maybe touch DNA? Test it, I said. Compare it to Penson. Maybe they shared tools. Thorne nodded and pulled out her phone. I'll put the request in, but it'll take weeks. I don't have weeks, I said. I'm 78. I don't even buy green bananas. I left the pub and walked along the Thames. The city lights reflected on the Blackwater. Penson had been a mentor. He found a kindred spirit, a young, twisted soul, and taught him the ropes. But the student had his own style. Penson was a collector. Graves was a creator. Penson took life. Graves tried to transform it into something else. My phone buzzed. It was Ramirez back in California. Jack, you're not going to believe this, he said, sounding breathless. We just got a call from the FBI. They flagged our inquiry into Thomas Graves. Why? Because the name Thomas Graves just popped up on a flight manifest yesterday. I stopped walking. What? He's using the alias again? No, Ramirez said. Someone using that passport, a very old, very fake passport, tried to board a flight from Buenos Aires to Miami. He was detained for using expired documents. Buenos Aires? I frowned. Why there? Argentina, Ramirez said. A lot of ... people went there to hide. But get this. The man detained? He's 57 years old, American, no fingerprints on file. But the Argentine police sent a mugshot. Send it to me. My phone pinged a moment later. I opened the image. The man looked rough, weather-beaten skin, gray beard, eyes that were hard and flat. He looked like a man who had spent 30 years looking over his shoulder. But on his left wrist, visible because he was holding up a booking number, was a faded green tattoo. Ivy. It's him, I whispered. Ramirez, it's him. The gardener. The feds are bringing him to Miami, Ramirez said. They want to know what his connection is to Penson. They don't know about the Europe murders yet. They just think he's an identity thief. Don't let them release him, I said. I'm flying to Miami. Thorne can send the UK case files to the FBI. We need to link him to the London murders before he lawyers up and disappears again. Jack, Ramirez warned, this guy isn't Penson. Penson surrendered. This guy tried to run. He fought the Argentine cops. He's dangerous. So am I said, hanging up. I booked the next flight to Miami. My credit card was crying, and my back was screaming, but my mind was laser-focused. 2 monsters. One locked up, one in transit. They were the yin and yang of death. The librarian and the gardener. As I waited at Heathrow for my connection, I pulled out Penson's notebook, or rather, the copy I'd made. I looked at the dates again. 1984. August. Departed Paris. T. Stays behind. The soil is good here, he says. T stays behind. Thomas. But why come back now? Why try to enter the U.S. in 2025 using a Burnett alias? I landed in Miami 12 hours later. The heat hit me like a wet towel. Ramirez had pulled strings, and an FBI agent named Cohen met me at the airport. He looked like he belonged in a boardroom, not a crime scene crisp suit, expensive watch, dismissive attitude. Mr. Miller, Cohen said, not offering a hand. We appreciate your ... enthusiasm, but this is a federal matter now. Identity fraud, potential fugitive status. He's a serial killer. Cohen, I snapped, struggling to keep up with his long strides through the terminal. He killed in London. He probably killed in Paris. And Penson taught him how. Allegedly, Cohen said. We have no physical evidence linking him to any murders. Just an old alias and a tattoo. That's circumstantial. Let me talk to him, I pleaded. I know Penson. I know how they think. Penson treated him like a son. Use that. Tell him Penson gave him up. Cohen stopped and looked at me. We already tried that. He laughed. He hasn't spoken a word since he landed. He's just ... staring at the wall. Let me try, I said. Please. I'm the one who found Penson's notebook. I'm the one who connected the dots. Cohen hesitated, then sighed. 5 minutes. You stay behind the glass. If he engages, we'll see. They brought me to an interrogation room that looked exactly like the one in Florida, just more humid. The gardener, sat there. He was smaller than I expected, wiry. His hands were rough, calloused, not librarian hands, worker hands. I walked in. Cohen stood by the door. Thomas, I said. The man didn't blink. Or do you prefer the gardener? A flicker. Just a tiny twitch of his eyelid. My name is Jack Miller. I just came from London. Inspector Thorne sends her regards. She's digging up your flower beds in Hyde Park. That got him. He turned his head slowly. His voice was raspy, unused. They were petunias, he said. Not just flowers. Petunias. Why petunias? I asked, sitting down. Because they are resilient, he said. They survive the frost. Unlike ... people. Penson told us about you. I lied. He said you were his greatest creation. The gardener laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound. Creation? Arthur didn't create me. He found me. I was already broken. He just gave me a purpose. What purpose? To weed the garden, he said, leaning forward. Arthur collected books. He wanted to preserve things. Locks of hair. Photos. He was sentimental. I am not. You're a pragmatic, I said. You bury them. I return them, he corrected, to the earth, where we all belong. Arthur wanted to keep them forever. I wanted to set them free. Why come back? I asked. Why now? You were safe in Argentina. He looked at his ivy tattoo. Because the soil there, it went sour. And Arthur ... He sent for me. Penson is in jail, I said. He couldn't send for you. The gardener smiled. Arthur has friends, Mr. Miller. Friends who aren't in jail. Friends who write letters. My heart stopped. Friends? Plural? Who? I demanded. Who else? The book club, he whispered, his eyes gleaming with a terrifying secret. Did you think it was just the two of us? A librarian always has a reading circle. I stood up, knocking my chair over. Cohen, we need Penson's mail logs. Now. The gardener just chuckled. A low, rumbling sound. You're looking at the first chapter, Jack. But we're already writing the sequel. I ran out of the room. The notebook, the missing pages, the book club. It wasn't a partnership. It was a network. And I had just walked right into the middle of their annual meeting. The book club. The words hung in the sterile air of the Miami FBI office like toxic smoke. I watched Cohen scramble, shouting orders into his phone, demanding prison mail logs for Arthur Penson. But my mind was already racing down a darker, colder highway. A network. It made a sickening kind of sense. Penson was a librarian, a man whose entire life revolved around organizing, cataloging, and sharing information. Why hoard his twisted knowledge when he could share it? Why be a solitary monster when he could be a mentor to a whole faculty of them? I needed air. I walked out of the federal building into the blinding Miami sun, but I felt no warmth. I called Ramirez. Jack, what's going on? Ramirez answered on the first ring. Cohen is tearing the prison warden, a new one on the other line. It's bigger than Penson and Graves, I said, my voice shaking. Graves called it the book club. Penson has been communicating with others. We need to know who visited him, who wrote to him, who he called. Not just recently, for decades. I'm pulling the visitor logs now, Ramirez said, the clicking of his keyboard audible. But Jack ... Penson was a model inmate in the county lockup before the transfer. He had access to the library cart. He was distributing books to other prisoners. Books, I whispered. He's passing messages in the books. Holy Shasterisk tea, Ramirez breathed. Marginalia. Underlined words. Dotted letters. It's the oldest trick in the book, and the most effective if nobody's looking for it, I added. Ramirez, get every book Penson touched in the last 6 months. Every single one. I hung up and looked at the palm trees swaying in the wind. They didn't look like paradise anymore. They looked like prison bars. I had to go back to California. The answer wasn't in Miami with a tight-lipped gardener. The answer was in Penson's past. I caught a red-eye to San Francisco. By the time I landed, I had been awake for 30 hours. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. But when I walked into the Santa Cruz station, the energy was electric. Ramirez had turned the conference room into a war room. Stacks of paperback books, westerns, romances, sci-fi covered the table. A team of young officers was flipping through them, wearing gloves, scanning pages with UV lights. "Jack," Ramirez waved me over. "Look at this." He held up a copy of Lonesome Dove. He flipped to page 142. "See the dots?" he asked, handing me a magnifying glass. I peered closely. Tiny, almost invisible pencil pricks under specific letters. MIT, ET, ET, OLD, Pi, ER. "When was this book returned?" I asked. 2 weeks ago, Ramirez said. Just before Penson was transferred to state prison. But look who checked it out next. He pointed to a log sheet. Name, Samuel R. Jenkins. Offense, petty theft. Released yesterday. A petty thief? I frowned. Penson is recruiting shoplifters? Or, Ramirez said, he's using them as couriers. Jenkins gets out, delivers the message to someone on the outside. The old pier, I muttered. The Santa Cruz wharf? Or the ruined one at Seacliff, Ramirez suggested. The cement ship. It's isolated. We need to find Jenkins, I said. Already on it. Bolo is out. But Jack, there's more. Ramirez pulled a thick binder from a shelf. We went back through Penson's employment records, like you said. The sabbatical in Europe wasn't his only trip. In the 90s, he took educational leave every summer. To different cities. Chicago, Seattle, New Orleans, Austin, and in every single one of those cities, during the exact weeks he was there remains an unsolved missing person case involving a young woman or a hitchhiker. I sank into a chair. He wasn't just killing. He was auditioning? Finding new members? Or visiting existing ones, Ramirez said grimly. Checking in on his students. The phone on the table buzzed. It was a uniformed officer. "Detective, we picked up Jenkins. He was trying to pawn a watch at a shop on Ocean Street." "Bring him in," Ramirez ordered. Samuel Jenkins was a twitchy kid in his 20s with bad skin and worse teeth. He looked terrified, which was good. Fear makes people talk. "I didn't do nothing," Jenkins wailed as soon as we walked in. "I just found the watch." "We don't care about the watch, Sam," Ramirez said, sitting down. "We care about the book." Lonesome Dove. Jenkins' eyes darted around the room. "Good book. Long. Who did you give the message to?" I asked, leaning against the wall. I played the bad cop by default of just looking old and angry. "What message?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "The dots, Sam," I said. Penson marked the book. "You checked it out. You memorized it. Who was it for?" Jenkins swallowed hard. "If I tell you, he'll kill me." "Penson is in Florida," Ramirez said. "He can't hurt you." "Not Penson," Jenkins hissed. "The other one. The one who waits." "Who waits where?" I demanded. "At the cement ship," Jenkins whispered. "Tonight, midnight, I was supposed to leave a signal. A blue ribbon tied to the railing." "A blue ribbon," I said, looking at Ramirez. "Penson's signature." "And if you leave the ribbon?" Ramirez asked. "Then he knows the package is ready to be moved." "What package?" "I don't know. I swear. I just leave the ribbon." We left Jenkins in the interrogation room and went back to the war room. "It's a trap," I said, "or a handoff. Someone is expecting a signal tonight. We set up a sting," Ramirez said. "We tie the ribbon. We wait." "I'm coming with you," I said. "Jack, no. It's dangerous. I've been chasing this ghost for 50 years, I said, putting on my jacket. "If he shows up, I want to see his face." The Seacliff Pier was a ghost ship of concrete, jutting out into the black Pacific. The SS Palo Alto had been grounded there decades ago, a tourist attraction turned ruin, broken by storms and time. At midnight, with the fog rolling in, it looked like the skeleton of a leviathan. I huddled in the back of an unmarked van with Ramirez and 2 SWAT guys. We watched the monitors. A tiny blue ribbon fluttered on the rusty railing in the wind. "Movement," the sniper on the roof radioed. "North side, Beach access. I squinted at the screen. A figure was walking along the sand, tall, wearing a long coat. He moved with a strange, limping gait. He stopped at the base of the pier. He looked up at the ribbon. Then he took out a phone. "He's calling someone," Ramirez whispered. "Trace it." The tech guy in the van typed furiously. "Burner phone. Relaying ... got it. He's calling a number in ... Chicago?" The figure on the beach hung up. He reached into his coat and pulled out ... a book. He placed it on a concrete piling, then turned and began to walk away. "Take him!" Ramirez shouted into the radio. Flare guns popped. Floodlights bathed the beach in blinding white light. "Police! Down on the ground!" The figure froze. He didn't run. He just raised his hands slowly. We scrambled out of the van and ran down the wooden stairs to the sand. Ramirez got there first, gun drawn. I was right behind him, my lungs burning. The man was old. Not as old as Penson, maybe 60. He had a refined face, silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like a university professor. "Turn around," Ramirez yelled. The man turned. He smiled. It was a polite, academic smile. "Good evening, officers," he said calmly. "Is there a problem?" I was just enjoying the ocean air. "The book," I panted, pointing to the piling. "Get the book." Ramirez holstered his weapon and grabbed the book. It was a copy of Dante's Inferno. "Who are you?" I asked the man. "My name is Dr. Lawrence Sterling," he said. "I teach comparative literature at UC Santa Cruz." "And what's your connection to Arthur Penson?" I asked. Sterling's smile didn't waver. "Arthur? Oh, we go way back. We share a love of ... classics." "You're part of the club," I said. "I am the secretary," Sterling said softly, so only I could hear. "Arthur is the founder. Thomas is the gardener. Every club needs officers, Mr. Miller." Ramirez was handcuffing him. "You're under arrest for conspiracy." "Conspiracy to what?" Sterling asked innocently. "Leaving a book on a pier? Is littering a felony now?" "We'll find the dots," I said. "We'll decode the message." Sterling laughed. "Go ahead. Read it." "It's a beautiful passage." Ramirez opened the book. He shone his light on the page Sterling had marked. It wasn't dots this time. It was highlighted text. "Abandon all hope. The Who enter here." And below it, scribbled in the margin in red ink, "The library is closed. The archives are open." "What does that mean?" Ramirez asked, looking up. But Sterling was looking at me. "It means, Jack, that you've been looking at the current collection. But you haven't checked the archives, the old ones, the ones we retired. Where are they?" I grabbed his lapel. "Where are the others?" "Everywhere," Sterling whispered. "We're not just a club. We're a franchise." As they dragged him away, I looked out at the dark ocean. A franchise, not a few partners, a system. My phone rang. It was Cohen from Miami. "Miller," he said, his voice tight. "We have a problem." "What now?" "The gardener, Thomas Graves. He just died in his cell." "What? How?" "Cyanide capsule. Hidden in a false tooth. But before he died, he wrote something on the wall. In his own blood." "Read it," I said, dread pooling in my stomach. The blast wave hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest, throwing Ramirez and me into the wet sand. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out the crashing waves. For a second, I just lay there, staring up at the night sky, watching embers drift down like perverse snowflakes. "Ramirez!" I coughed, my voice sounding distant and underwater. I'm okay," Ramirez groaned from somewhere to my left. He was clutching his arm, blood seeping through his jacket sleeve, but he was moving. My arm? Shrapnel, I think. The SWAT team was already swarming us, dragging us away from the smoking crater where the concrete piling and the book had been. Dr. Lawrence. Sterling was being shoved into the back of a squad car, laughing. A manic, scholarly laugh that chilled me more than the explosion. The fire! He screamed as the door slammed shut. It's cleansing, it's history. Paramedics were on us in minutes. They wrapped Ramirez's arm and checked my vitals. I was bruised, deafened, and furious, but alive. It was a trap, Ramirez winced as they loaded him onto a stretcher. He knew we'd intercept the book. He wanted to take out the lead investigators. No, I said, wiping soot from my face. He didn't want to kill us. If he wanted us dead, that bomb would have been bigger. He wanted to destroy the evidence and send a message, the gardener's dying words. Sterling screaming. It was coordinated. I refused the hospital. I needed to get to a secure line. I had Cohen in Miami on speed dial. Cohen. I barked into the phone as I paced the perimeter of the crime scene. Graves is dead. Sterling is in custody. And we just survived an IED on a public beach. This isn't a serial killer ring anymore. This is domestic terrorism. It gets worse, Jack, Cohen said, his voice grim. We searched Graves' belongings from Argentina. He had a laptop. Encryption was tough, but we cracked a partition. It's a list. A list of victims? No. A list of locations, libraries, archives, historical societies. Across the country. Penson was a librarian, I muttered. Sterling is a professor. They target places of knowledge. Jack, the first location on the list, is the Santa Cruz Public Library. The downtown branch. My blood ran cold. That's where the evidence is stored, not the police station. The old evidence, the archives. Penson's original files from the 70s are in the basement storage there because of the overflow. And the second location? Cohen continued, the Miami-Dade Public Library, where Penson worked in the 90s. They're cleaning house, I realized. They're burning the history. The archives are open. That's what Sterling wrote. He didn't mean open for reading. He meant open for destruction. I grabbed a uniform officer. Drive me to the library. Now. Sir, the scene is drive. The Santa Cruz Public Library was a brutalist concrete block downtown, usually quiet at this hour. But as we turned the corner, I saw the orange glow reflecting off the low clouds. Too late, I whispered. Smoke was pouring from the ventilation shafts. The fire alarms were screaming into the night. Fire trucks were already arriving, their sirens wailing a mournful harmony. I jumped out of the car before it stopped. The basement! You have to get to the basement. I yelled at a firefighter unrolling a hose. Get back, sir. The structure is unsafe. I watched helplessly as the flames licked up the sides of the building. Decades of records. Witness statements. Physical evidence from the 70s that we had only just begun to re-examine. All of it turning to ash. Ramirez's phone, which I had held onto, buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it up. A text message from an unknown number. Fire purifies. Water drowns. Earth buries. Air carries the scream. We are the elements, Jack, and you are just a man. I stared at the screen. Elements. Penson was the librarian intellect, structure. Graves was the gardener earth. Sterling, the fire. Who was water? Who was air? I dialed Cohen back. The library is gone, I said, my voice hollow. They burned it, but I got a text. They call themselves the elements. We have earth and fire accounted for. We need to find water and air. Water double Cohen mused. Jack, remember the 1984 gap? When Penson was in Europe, you said he went to London and Paris. But Graves had a visa for Venice. Venice? We found a train ticket stub in Graves' digital wallet. Venice, Italy, December 1984. Water, I said. Venice is a city of water. And air? Cohen asked. Air carries the scream. I repeated the text. Air travel. Pilot's radio? Penson's flight logs, Cohen said. He flew private a few times in the 90s. Chartered planes. Maybe the pilot is air? We need Sterling to talk, I said. He's the only one left alive who knows the roster. Sterling is being transferred to a federal supermax in the morning, Cohen said. You have tonight. If you can get into the holding cell. I'm already on my way. The Santa Cruz County Jail holding cells smelled of bleach and despair. Sterling sat on a metal bunk, reading a Bible the guard had given him. He looked calm, unbothered by the soot on his face or the handcuffs on his wrists. Jack, he smiled, not looking up from Leviticus. I assume the library is. Warm? It's gone, Lawrence, I said, sitting on the stool outside the bars. And so is your friend Graves. He swallowed cyanide. Sterling paused, turning a page. Thomas always was dramatic. He preferred the tragic ending. You're going to prison for the rest of your life, Lawrence. Bombing a police officer? Arson? You'll die in a concrete box. We all die in boxes, Jack. Arthur told you that. Who are the others? I asked. Who is water? Who is air? Sterling closed the Bible. He stood up and walked to the bars. Up close, his eyes were terrifyingly sane. You think this is about killing? He asked softly. You think we're just psychopaths who get off on blood? How pedestrian. Then what is it? It's about art, Sterling whispered. It's about the narrative. The world is chaotic, Jack. Messy. People live and die without meaning. We give them structure. We give them a story, a mystery that lasts forever. We make them immortal. You make them dead, I spat. Is Julia Harrison dead? He asked. Or is she the most famous name in this town? Is she a legend? Before us, she was just a girl who played the flute. Now, she is a myth. I wanted to punch him through the bars, but I needed him to slip up. Venice, I said suddenly. 1984, Sterling blinked. Just once. Ah, he said. You found the ticket. Who did Penson meet in Venice? He didn't meet anyone, Sterling said. He met her. Her? The siren, Sterling smiled. The one who sings to the water. She's breathtaking. Arthur was in love with her, in his own way. She taught him that water doesn't just hide things. It transforms them. Where is she? Where she always is, Sterling said, turning his back to me. By the sea. Listening to the waves. Give me a name, Lawrence. He chuckled. I'll give you a riddle. Arthur loved riddles. She lives where the land ends and the music begins. She plays the cello for the drowning men. I stood up. You're insane. And you're running out of time, Sterling said. Because air is already moving. And he's much faster than you. I left the jail. My head was spinning. Where the land ends and the music begins. I drove to the cliff overlooking the ocean. The fire at the library was dying down, a smoldering scar on the city. Water. A woman. A musician? A cello player? Where the land ends, I muttered. Land's End? The point? Then it hit me. A memory from 1995. A high-profile disappearance. A famous cellist, Isabella Rossi, who vanished from her cliffside home in Big Sur. Her car was found, but she wasn't. The case was never solved. But Sterling said she was alive. She lives where the land ends. Big Sur, the edge of the continent. I pulled up the old file on my phone. Isabella Rossi. Age at disappearance, 34. Beautiful. Talented. Rumored to be mentally unstable. And her home, it was a glass house perched on a cliff. The Glass Sonata, the architects called it. It had been sold after her disappearance. But to whom? I accessed the property records. The buyer was a shell company. Poseidon Trust. Poseidon. God of the sea. Water. I called Ramirez, who was in the hospital but awake. Ramirez, I said, I know where water is. Big Sur, the old Rossi estate. Jack, you can't go there alone, Ramirez slurred, clearly on painkillers. Wait for backup. Air is moving, I said. If I wait, she'll be gone. Or dead. Jack, I hung up. I checked the glove compartment. I had my old service revolver, a .38 special I hadn't fired in 20 years. It felt heavy and cold in my hand. I drove south on Highway 1. The fog was thick, the ocean crashing against the rocks below like a hungry beast. The road twisted and turned, a black ribbon on the edge of the world. I pulled up to the gates of the glass Sonata. They were open, not a good sign. I killed the headlights and drove up the long driveway. The house was dark, a jagged silhouette against the gray sky. I got out, gun drawn. The wind howled. And then, over the wind, I heard it. Deep, mournful, resonant. A cello. It was coming from the house. I crept toward the front door. It was ajar. I pushed it open with my foot. The main room was all glass, looking out over the raging ocean. In the center of the room, lit by a single candle, sat a woman. She was older now, her hair gray and wild, but her posture was unmistakable. She was playing the cello, a melody that sounded like weeping. And sitting in a chair across from her, listening intently, was a man in a pilot's uniform. Air. He turned as I entered. He held a silenced pistol in his lap. "You're late, Mr. Miller?" the pilot said smoothly. "The concert is almost over. Isabella?" I asked, ignoring him, looking at the woman. She didn't stop playing. Her eyes were closed. She was in a trance. "She doesn't hear you," the pilot said. "She only hears the water. Who are you?" I aimed my .38 at his chest. "I'm Captain Drake," he said. "I'm the one who delivers the packages, the one who drops them from the sky. Arthur liked the woods. Thomas liked the earth. Lawrence liked the fire. But I like the fall. Put the gun down, Drake. Or what?" He smiled. "You'll shoot? And miss?" "You're shaking, Jack." He was right. My hand was trembling. "Isabella is the muse," Drake said, standing up slowly. "She provides the soundtrack. We provide the bodies. It's a perfect symphony." He raised his gun. I fired. My shot went wide. My hand was shaking too much, the recoil of the old .38 jarring my entire arm. The bullet shattered one of the massive glass panes overlooking the Pacific, and for a second, the sound of the ocean was deafening. Captain Drake, air, didn't even flinch. He brought his own weapon up, a sleek, modern pistol with a suppressor that made it look like a black insect. The cello music stopped. Isabella Rossi's eyes opened. They were the color of the deep ocean, and just as empty. "Discord," she whispered, her voice like cracking ice. "There is discord in the symphony." Drake smiled at me. "You see, Jack? You've ruined the finale." He aimed for my chest. Then, a blur of motion from the doorway. Ramirez, one arm in a sling, his face pale and determined, stood there holding his service weapon with his good hand. "Drop it," Ramirez yelled. Drake's eyes widened in surprise. That was all the time I needed. I dove to the side as he swung his gun toward Ramirez. He fired once, the silenced shot making a soft thump. Ramirez grunted and went down, clutching his leg. I scrambled behind a ridiculously expensive-looking sofa. "You okay, kid?" I yelled. "Just a flesh wound." He shouted back, a grimace on his face. "This guy's a better shot than you. Thanks for the vote of confidence." "She's getting away," Ramirez added. I peered over the sofa. He was right. Isabella Rossi, water, was walking calmly toward a sliding glass door that led to a balcony perched directly over the cliff edge. She moved like she was in a dream, her cello left behind like a discarded lover. "I can't let her fall," I muttered. "We needed her alive." "I'll cover you," Ramirez said, propping himself up against the doorframe. I took a deep breath and broke cover, running not at Drake, but toward the balcony. Drake fired again, the bullet whizzing past my ear and burying itself in a very ugly modern art sculpture. Ramirez returned fire, forcing Drake to duck behind a grand piano. I burst onto the balcony just as Isabella was climbing onto the railing. The wind whipped her gray hair around her face. Below her, the ocean churned, a black and white fury of waves crashing against jagged rocks. "Isabella, stop!" I shouted over the storm. She turned to look at me. There was no fear in her eyes, only a strange, placid sadness. "The music is over," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The tide is coming in. It's time to go home." "This isn't your home, Isabella," I said, inching closer. "You were a victim. They took you." She shook her head slowly. "Arthur didn't take me. He saved me. The world was too loud. So much noise. He gave me the quiet. He gave me the water. He's a killer," I said. "He killed Julia Harrison." Her expression changed. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something human. "Julia?" she asked. "The girl with the flute?" Her music was ... unsophisticated, all major keys. No understanding of the beautiful dissonance of sorrow. This woman wasn't a victim. She was one of them. She was the critic. Arthur said her song was too loud, I remembered. So he silenced it. He tuned her, Isabella corrected, her voice becoming stronger. He tuned her to the key of the earth. Just as Thomas tuned the soil, and Lawrence tuned the flames, and Drake tunes the air, I provide the score. We are the orchestra, Mr. Miller, and you are a sour note. Behind me, I heard another shot, then a heavy thud. Isabella smiled. "The percussion has ended," she said. She leaned back, opening her arms as if to embrace the storm. "Time for the crescendo." She let go. I lunged forward, grabbing her arm just as her feet left the railing. My 78-year-old shoulder screamed in protest as her dead weight almost pulled me over with her. My feet slipped on the wet tiles of the balcony. "Let me go." She shrieked, her trance broken, replaced by a wild, desperate fury. "I need to be with the water," she thrashed, her free hand clawing at my face. I held on, my knuckles white, my whole body shaking with the strain. Then strong hands grabbed my belt, pulling me back from the edge. It was Ramirez, limping, his face a mask of pain and grit. Together, we hauled her back over the railing. She collapsed onto the balcony, sobbing, the fight gone out of her. I looked back into the house. Drake was on the floor, a growing red stain on his white pilot's shirt. He had been shot in the chest. "You got him," I said to Ramirez. "He got me first," Ramirez grunted, sliding down the wall, his leg giving out. "My aim's better when I'm bleeding, I guess." Sirens were getting closer now, a chorus of hope cutting through the storm. We had them. Earth, fire, water, and air. The core members of the book club were either dead or in custody. The weeks that followed were a blur of federal debriefings, hospital visits for Ramirez, and endless cups of terrible coffee. The FBI, now fully invested, took over. They treated me less like a bumbling old man and more like a ... consultant. An old, cranky consultant they wanted to keep on a short leash. Isabella Rossi, the siren, was declared mentally unfit to stand trial. She was sent to a secure psychiatric facility, where she reportedly spent her days staring at a blank wall, humming a single discordant note over and over. Captain Drake's flight logs were a treasure trove of horror. He had been a private pilot for wealthy clients for 30 years. The FBI began cross-referencing his flight paths with unsolved disappearances near small private airfields. The list was long. Drake's method was simple. Offer a friendly ride to someone stranded, take off, and then ... open the door. He liked the fall, The network was crumbling. We had the main players. It should have been over. I should have felt relief. Justice for Julia Harrison, for Sarah Miller, for all the nameless victims in Penson's ledger. But I didn't, because of what Sterling had said. You've been looking at the current collection, but you haven't checked the archives, the old ones, the ones we retired. I was sitting in Ramirez's hospital room, watching him try to solve a crossword puzzle with his good hand. What do you do with a book you don't want anymore? I asked. Donate it to the library? He offered. The library is a pile of ash, I reminded him. What if you're a collector, a rare book collector? You sell it, he said. Or you put it in storage, or you give it to an apprentice, I said, standing up. Penson taught graves. What if Penson wasn't the only teacher? What if Sterling, Drake, and Rossi all had their own students? Ramirez put down his newspaper. Jack, we got them. It's over. The FBI is handling it. Go home, drink a scotch. Watch the sunset. Penson is still alive, I said. And as long as he's alive, the library is never truly closed. I had to see him one last time. The Supermax prison was a sterile fortress in the middle of a desert. Arthur Penson had been transferred here, deemed too high risk for any other facility. He was in a glass cell, like an animal in a zoo. He looked smaller, older. He was reading, of course. A thick book with a plain cover. Hello, Arthur, I said into the microphone. He looked up. His watery blue eyes were the same. Jack, he said, his voice a dry rasp. Come to see the last volume in the collection? I came to see the end, I said. Graves is dead. Sterling is in solitary. Rossi is insane. Drake is on a slab. It's over. Penson smiled. It was that same, unnerving smile. Is it? A story never ends, Jack. It just pauses. Readers die. Authors die. But the book remains. And there are always new readers. There are no more readers, I said. We have the whole club. You have a chapter, he corrected me. A very exciting one, I admit, but it's not the whole story. I'm 79 years old, Jack. I've been a librarian for a very long time. I've curated many collections. The retired ones, I said. The archives. Sterling told me. Ah, Lawrence, Penson sighed. Always so theatrical. He loves foreshadowing. Who are they, Arthur? Where are they? Penson leaned forward, placing his hand on the glass. They are quiet now. They are the sleepers. They are the ones who read my early works and learned, but they have their own styles now, their own signatures. They don't need the club anymore. They are ... independent authors. A cold dread crept up my spine. This wasn't a network. It was a movement. A philosophy. You think you've won, Jack? Penson asked. You caught a few of us. You made a lot of noise, but you can't stop an idea. You can't arrest a story? He picked up his book. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm at a very interesting part. I turned to leave. My shoulders slumped. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just an old man who had stumbled into a library of horrors, read a few chapters, but would never finish the book. Jack, Penson said. I stopped. There's one more thing, he said. The first edition. The very first book I ever ... Before Julia, long before. Who? I asked. 1962, Penson said, his eyes distant. A girl in my hometown in Ohio. A runaway. No one ever looked for her. She was my first draft, my practice run. She wasn't very good, messy, but you have to start somewhere, don't you? He looked at me, his eyes locking onto mine. Her name was Eleanor Miller. The world tilted on its axis. My blood turned to ice. My sister, I whispered. My sister Ellie. She ran away in 62. We thought she just started a new life. Penson smiled. It was the smile of the devil himself. She did, he said. A very short one. I told you, Jack, we're all part of the story. I stared at the man who had not only haunted my entire professional life, but had secretly written the first, most tragic chapter of my own. Justice for Julia Harrison was done, but justice for Eleanor Miller had just begun. Time stopped. The sterile, fluorescent world of the Supermax prison dissolved into a black and white photograph from 1962. I was 16 again. I was standing on the porch of our small Ohio farmhouse, watching my older sister Eleanor walk down the long dirt driveway with a single suitcase in her hand. "I'm going to be a star, Jackie," she had told me, her eyes shining with a fierce, naive ambition. "I'm going to Hollywood, and you'll see my name in lights." She never looked back. We got one postcard from Arizona, and then ... nothing. For 60 years, my family had lived with the quiet ambiguity of her disappearance. We told ourselves she had found her dream, or found a new one, and just didn't want to be tied to her dusty Ohio roots. It was a kinder story than the truth. The truth was sitting on the other side of the glass, smiling at me. "Eleanor Miller," I repeated, my voice a hollow echo of itself. The name felt foreign, a historical artifact I hadn't touched in decades. "She was talkative," Penson said, savoring the memory like a fine wine. "So full of ... hope. It's a messy emotion. Hope. It gets everywhere. I was young then, still learning my craft. I met her at a bus station in Flagstaff. I was just a boy myself, working at the local library for the summer. I told her I was going to California too, that we could travel together. My legs gave out. I sank onto the cold metal stool. You ... you were a kid," I stammered, trying to make sense of it. "You were only a few years older than her." 17, he said. "A year older than your sister." But I was already a keen observer of human nature. I knew what she wanted to hear. I was her audience. And every performer needs an audience. The room spun. The case that had defined my life, the obsession that had cost me my marriage and my peace of mind, wasn't an accident. It was an echo. It was Penson, reaching out across the decades, pulling me into the final act of his story he had started when we were both just boys. He had chosen me. Or rather, he had chosen my family, and I had simply followed the trail of breadcrumbs he left behind. "Why?" I choked out. "Why tell me now?" "Because the story needs a good ending, Jack," Penson said, his eyes gleaming. "The protagonist needs to confront the villain. He needs to understand the true scope of the tragedy. It's catharsis. It's what you reporters live for. This is your Pulitzer." I wanted to smash the glass. I wanted to tear him apart with my bare hands, but he was untouchable. He had won. He had crafted a perfect narrative, and I was just his final, unwitting character. "Where is she, Arthur?" I asked, my voice cracking. "What did you do with my sister?" Penson leaned back, a look of genuine thought on his face. "Ohio ... so long ago. The soil was different there. Richer, darker. There was an old, abandoned well on my grandfather's farm. We used to tell ghost stories about it as kids. It seemed ... appropriate, poetic, even. An old well. The air left my lungs. I stood up, turned my back on him, and walked away. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to say. I didn't call the police. I didn't call Ramirez. I booked a flight to Columbus, Ohio. I rented a car and drove east, toward the forgotten corner of the state where I grew up. The town hadn't changed much. The main street was still there, a little more run down, a few more boarded-up shops. Our old farmhouse was gone, replaced by a modern subdivision with identical houses and manicured lawns. But I knew where Penson's grandfather's farm had been. It was just a few miles down the road, now overgrown and part of a state park. I bought a shovel and a powerful flashlight at the local hardware store. The kid at the counter gave me a weird look, but I didn't care. I waited until dusk. I parked my car on the side of the road and walked into the woods. The trees were thick, the air heavy with the smell of damp earth. I remembered playing in these woods as a boy. I remembered Eleanor chasing me, her laughter echoing through the trees. It took me an hour to find it. The well was almost completely hidden by vines and undergrowth, a circle of crumbling stones in the middle of a small clearing. I started to dig. The work was brutal. My back ached, my hands blistered. But I didn't stop. I dug for hours, fueled by a grief that was 60 years old and a rage that was brand new. Around 3 a.m., my shovel hit something that wasn't dirt or rock. It was a metallic clink. I got down on my knees and dug with my hands. I pulled it out. It was a small rusted tin box, a lunchbox. Eleanor had a lunchbox just like it, with a picture of a rocket ship on the front. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely open it. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded, rotted fabric, was a single object, a silver locket. I opened it. On one side was a tiny, faded picture of my parents. On the other, a picture of a smiling 16-year-old boy. Me. I fell back, the locket clutched in my hand, and I wept. I wept for the sister I had lost, for the life she never got to live, and for the naive boy in the photograph who had no idea what monsters walked the earth. I don't know how long I sat there. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. I knew what I had to do. I called Ramirez. "Jack, where are you? The FBI has been looking for you." "I'm in Ohio," I said, my voice hoarse. "I found her." There was silence on the other end. "Ellie?" Ramirez finally asked, his voice soft. "Penson told me," I said. "He killed her. She was the first. Jack, come home. We'll handle it. We'll send a team." "No," I said. This one is for me. I need you to do something for me, kid." "Anything." "Penson," I said. "He reads. He loves stories. I want you to send him a book, a new one." "From me? What book?" "It doesn't matter," I said. "Just make sure it has a note inside, from the author." "What should it say?" I looked at the silver locket in my hand, at the picture of the boy I used to be. It should say, "The story isn't over. I'm writing the epilogue. I didn't go back to California. I stayed in Ohio. I checked into a small motel, and I started to write. I wrote down everything. The story of Julia Harrison. The story of the book club. The story of the librarian, the gardener, the fire, the water, and the air. And I wrote the story of Eleanor Miller. I was a reporter. I dealt in facts. But Penson had taught me something. Facts are just the skeleton. It's the story that gives it flesh and blood. He wanted to be a myth, a legend. He wanted his crimes to be his legacy. I was going to give him one, but it would be my version, not his. I would write the truth in all its ugly, brutal detail. I would name every victim. I would tell their stories. I would turn his art into a cheap, tawdry, pathetic police report. I would strip him of his mystique and leave him naked and exposed for what he was. A sad, broken little man who destroyed lives because he couldn't create one of his own. I called my old editor at the Sentinel. "I have a story for you," I said. "A big one. A serial. And it's going to be free for every newspaper in the country to print." "What's it called?" he asked. I looked at the first page I had written. "It's called The Librarian," I said. "And it's a non-fiction." Penson wanted to be a story. I would make him one. But he wouldn't be the hero. He wouldn't even be the villain. He would be a footnote in the stories of the people he had hurt. The epilogue had begun, and the author was me. The story went viral before the ink was even dry on the morning editions. The Librarian became a global phenomenon. The world didn't see Arthur Penson as a mastermind anymore. They saw him as a sad, pathetic thief of lives. The internet, in its brutal wisdom, stripped him of his dignity. He wasn't a genius. He was a meme, a cautionary tale, a small man who cast a long shadow only because the sun was setting. I finished the series in 3 weeks. I wrote about every victim Ramirez, and the FBI could confirm. I gave them their names back. I gave them their hobbies, their favorite songs, the color of their eyes. I drowned Penson's art in a flood of humanity. But there was one chapter left to write, the one I lived. 6 months after I found Eleanor, I received a letter. It had no return address, but the postmark was from Florence, Italy. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of high-quality paper, smelling faintly of old parchment and lemon. Dear Jack, I read your epilogue. It was ... competent. A bit sentimental for my taste, but effective. You turned the audience against the author. A classic deconstruction. Arthur is furious, of course. He hates bad reviews. But I found it quite inspiring. You see, you made a mistake, Jack. You assumed the book club was a hierarchy. Founder, officers, members. But true literature isn't a monarchy. It's an anthology. Arthur started the story, but he didn't own the copyright. We all contributed. And while you were busy burning down the library, you forgot something very important. Some books are checked out indefinitely. I was never Water Jack. That was just a role I played for Arthur. My real name is not important. What is important is that I have the rest of the archives. And I have found a new publisher. Enjoy your retirement. The next volume is already in print. The editor, I stared at the letter. The editor. I thought back to Venice, to Isabella Rossi, to the siren. Sterling had said Penson met her in Venice. But he never said she was the only one. The editor, someone above Penson? Or someone beside him, watching, curating, refining. I picked up the phone to call Ramirez. My thumb hovered over the dial button. I looked out the window of my small Ohio motel room. The sun was setting over the cornfields, turning the world gold and amber. I was tired. My bones ached with the weight of 80 years and too many ghosts. If I called Ramirez, the hunt would start again. The obsession, the sleepless nights, the chase that never ends. But then I looked at the silver locket on the desk, at the picture of Eleanor, and the picture of me. The story isn't over. I put the phone down. I picked up my pen. I wasn't a detective anymore. I wasn't even a reporter. I was something else. I was a critic, and I had one hell of a scathing review to write. I packed my bag. Florence was nice this time of year, and I had always wanted to see the Uffizi. I walked out of the motel room, leaving the key on the dresser. As I got into my car, I looked in the rearview mirror. The old man staring back at me didn't look tired anymore. He looked hungry. The librarian was closed. The gardener was buried. The fire was extinguished. The water was silent. The air was grounded. But the editor was about to miss a deadline. I started the engine. The road stretched out before me, long and dark and full of terrifying promise. Chapter 1. I whispered to the empty car, and I drove into the night.